Hello, my name is Grahita Ananta, student number 045 from Introduction to Film Studies, Class A. On this podcast, I'm going to present my review of the movie entitled Nomadland. Directed by Chloe Zhao and released in September 2020, this movie became the winner of Oscar 2021, Best Motion Picture of the Year. So before we go into further discussion, here a synopsis of this movie. In short, Nomadland tells the story of a woman named Fern, played by Frances McDormand. Her husband died, so she experienced life in her old age alone. Living as a nomad, living outside in a van, traveling from one city to another, was the life she chose. Fern applied for various jobs, one of which was on a Amazon warehouse. But then, she had to move and move again. The life she chose as a nomad became like a spiritual journey for her. Fern became acquainted with the nomadic community, meeting a lot of nomad people like her. From there she learned many things, ways of life from other perspectives, and experiences that would not be obtained if she didn't live as a nomad. Because it tells the story of life as a nomad, so the setting in this film is mostly in the outside world. Long roads like a journey to the open nature that Fern made in the middle of her journey, or places where Fern stopped by in her van to spend the night. The main character of this movie is Fern herself, and some other characters are the people Fern met along her journey, such as Dave, Swanky, and Linda May. The theme of this movie is freedom and community. Next, we will go into a more in-depth discussion. I will give an analysis and review related to the plot, the symbolism that I found from this movie, and a little about the cinematography. The first part is the plot. So basically, this movie has an interesting story, but when talking about the plot, I can actually say that it almost doesn't have a clear plot. Throughout the story, the viewer is sometimes curious about how the actual storyline is emphasized in this movie, what is Fern's aim to keep moving from one place to another, or what conflicts underline the plot of this movie. In my opinion, the storyline that is emphasized in this movie is the journey of Fern itself. The background of the plot is freedom as well as the journey that Fern chooses, not because of any particular conflict. So somehow this movie then leads to a documentary which is focused on telling the story of Fern's journey and what she finds on her journey. More deeply, in my view, Fern repeatedly experienced having to watch every character she made leave her, especially Dave, Swanky, and Linda May who had bonded with Fern. Over and over again, Fern watched the fans of the people she met and leave her, continuing their way. That things that Fern faced as a nomad like that, which in the end added emotion to the storyline and built the plot. So they have their own story as Swanky who wants to spend the rest of her life while still continuing her journey. I think that's one of the parts that the film wants to emphasize even though it's very implicit actually. Then the second part that we will explore here is symbolism, or in other words, the meaning that we can take from the movie. So one thing that sticks with this movie is home. The word home in Nomadland has a very implicit meaning. In one scene of the movie, a girl says to Fern, "Mom said you are homeless." But one Fern answer is, "Not homeless, but houseless." Not the same thing, right? From Fern's answer, it can be interpreted that the word home doesn't refer to a form of building, but a place where a person is emotionally attached. Maybe that meant her friend or the places she stopped at or from her journeys. that she felt right at home. Because it is quite clear that Fern's character here doesn't need a house in a concrete form, but home, and maybe that's what she sought and found on her journey as a nomad. However, the meaning of home for Fern and other nomads in the movie seems to contradict the so-called American dream. The premise of the American dream is that once a person owns their own land and can support themselves, then they can achieve the ideal of American life. That's why in one scene, a character refers to Fern as inhabiting the authentic one, or she means the brave to live differently. And the last one, we will talk about the cinematography in this movie. Joshua James Ricard, the film's cinematographer, won the prestigious Golden Frog at the 2020 Cannes Image Film Festival. In my opinion, the cinematography in this movie supports the story that's being raised. Taking shots that are dominant from medium shots to long shots are very appropriate. Through this type of shot, the viewer is invited to recognize the outside world like what Fern is exploring. The viewer is like traveling along in this movie. And as previously mentioned, the setting of Nomadland is mostly outdoors, in the nature or long roads, so that taking shots such as medium shots or long shots in this movie is appropriate. It is not only the actor that becomes the focus or the object that is emphasized, but also the setting of the place around. All in all, Nomadland is a worthy winner of Oscar 2021. With a story that is interesting and not cliched, it has a lot of meaning about life from a nomad perspective. So, that's all my review of Nomadland, and thank you very much for listening.